Good evening. Thank you all for coming this evening. On behalf of the South Central Synod of Wisconsin-ELCA Racial Justice Equity Team, that's a long term, but on behalf of all of us, and those of us who are represented here today are Donna and George, myself, and Peter. Is there anybody else from our team who's here today? On behalf of us, we just want to say thank you for coming. And we want to thank Pastor Rob and Brian with New Life Church for setting this up for us, for welcoming us, and for providing the refreshments this evening. My name's Krista Fisher. I'm on the Racial Justice Equity Team. I think that's what it's called. Okay, I get it confused. But I'm on the team. Okay, I am a youth pastor at Lake Edge Lutheran Church, and I'm one of the two chaplains at the Dane County Jail, and I feel very privileged to be on this team and to be able to bring my perspective from where I work, which is a unique environment, and my own perspective from my life experiences to this. And I just feel very strongly about it, and I'm glad that I'm glad that the interest in this committee is growing. I met a number of people today who said that they wanted to come, but there were a number of conflicting events. And thankfully, tonight's event is being recorded. So if you have friends or family or folks in your congregation who would be interested in watching this, actually I'm sure everyone will be interested in watching it. It's very interesting. I encourage you to let them know about this. And in order to do that, I would invite you, when you're finished, or when the evening is over, outside those doors over there, there's a picture of Jesus. Right next to that, right below that picture is a sign-in pad. If you could put your email address down, we'll be sure to email you a link to this presentation, a link to the bibliography that the Racial Justice Equity Team is compiling, which will include potentially some books that George and Donna may reference this evening, and it will include information on upcoming events. So please give us your email address before you leave so we can keep you appraised of what's happening. Our two speakers tonight are George Swamp and Donna Butler. Donna is a member here at New Life, and George is a member with me at Lake Edge Lutheran. And they both have books that they're going to be sharing this evening that were written by members of their families. So they're going to read these books to us. I think that the books would typically be classified as children's books because of the simplicity of the language and the beauty of the illustrations. But the messages are exceptionally deep and broad and will resonate with people of any age. So they're going to be sharing those stories with us tonight, and then they're going to be talking about their family members, Donna's sister and George's family member, which he'll explain. They'll be telling us some of their stories as well. And will there be time for question and answer? At the end. Okay, so you'll do your presentations, and then at the end we'll have time for question and answer, and I will walk around with the microphones. Actually, no, I won't. I will invite you to come to the microphones to ask a question, and if you need assistance with that or need the microphone brought to you, just raise your hand and we'll do that. So let us begin with a prayer, and then we will turn it over to our speakers. Good and gracious God, we give you thanks for this community of people who are gathered together here in your presence, surrounded by your Spirit, and here to learn more about your children, about this human experience. We ask that you bless our time together. You bless Donna and George as they share these necessary and intimate and personal and beautiful and painful stories with us. And we ask that you open our hearts and you open our minds, that we are able to receive these without defense, with compassion and curiosity and respect and integrity. And God, we ask that you guide this committee and all the people who are engaged in it so that it continues to do your work. We ask that you lead us to places that we do not see. You give us the strength and the courage to follow your will. And we ask that you just bless us on this journey. And we ask this all in the name of your Son, our brother in the struggle of life, our Savior and our Lord, Jesus the Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. And Donna, are you first? All right.
Welcome. I'm so happy you decided to join us this evening. That was the traditional singers of the Longhouse, which is our belief system in the Oneida Iroquois peoples. George and I will be singing 2 verses of Amazing Grace. He will speak the words, and I will sing it in our Oneida language.
There's a reason we're doing this. When the Oneida people came to Wisconsin, this is how we saved our language. The first phrase is, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. That's...
I'm going to sing it while you talk.
All right.
Okay. Jatka toje ne sun kwawe.
That saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun.
Thank you, George.
Yep.
I would like to speak on my sister Sandra Louise Decoto Ori. She was born on February 28, 1948. She was second oldest of 6 children. She attended the Oneida State Graded Country School, 2 rooms, in Oneida, Wisconsin. She attended and graduated from Seymour Community High School in Seymour, Wisconsin as an honor student. In her early years, she attended the University of Eau Claire for 2 years. Shortly thereafter, she met her fiancé, and they moved to Detroit, where she worked and attended Wayne State University for a while. After marrying, she and her husband decided to move to Green Bay, where she attended University of Wisconsin Green Bay with the University Without Walls while she was raising a family. Her studies consisted of Native American studies, weaving and processing raw wool with her own spinning wheel and room-size loom. There she earned her bachelor's degree and went on to UW-Oshkosh and attained her master's degree in education. She also acquired a postgraduate certification from the University of Milwaukee, and she was a participant in creating the Wisconsin curriculum for elementary schools. Her career began as a Title IV coordinator for the Green Bay school system. She eventually became a teacher for the original tribal elementary school. There she did bring in the RIF, Reading is Fundamental program. She moved on and became employed by the Sheboygan School District while attaining her Reading Specialist certificate. Years later, she became the Oneida Elementary School principal and belonged to the Principals Association. Unfortunately, her ill health forced her into early retirement, and she also could not finish the last 3 seasonal books she was hoping to write. She was a member of the Woodland Writers, an all-woman organization of Native American women writers. She belonged to the Wisconsin State Reading Association. This book received the National Book Award, the American Bookseller Pick of the List in 1995, the Kentucky Bluegrass Award Master List 1996, the Notable Children's Trade Book in Field of Social Studies 1995. My sister was an inspiring and loving mother, homemaker, noted for her delicious meals, as my son, and baking. She was a self-taught gemstone jeweler. She was an accomplished author and an inspiration to all Native women who knew and met her and read of her. There are some symbols of this book when I read it and when you see it that I would like to point out to you. The book itself, in the front of it, there is what looks like beading, and that is of our traditional Native people. The great white pine helps us to center to Mother Earth. The history of the pine symbolized the unity of the 6 nations of our Iroquois Confederacy, which is the Cayuga, Mohawk, Onondaga, Oneida, Seneca, and Tuscarora. We are the people of the Longhouse. The hawk represents the bringer of good news, which when I see them wherever I travel, I give thanks to the Great Spirit for him. Our elder brother, the sun, keeps us warm, helps our plants, our life grow, us grow. We recognize the cedar and sweetgrass as they are used in our ceremonies. The corn, beans, and squash are the 3 sisters. They are planted together in the same fields, unlike traditional farming that we know. They have sustained the Oneidas and helped us survive throughout time. We observe the trilliums on the floor, the forest floors, and they, of course, let us know that it's springtime. The first fruits of the season are strawberries, and we celebrate them and consider them one of our medicines. We celebrate the circle of life through this book. To sing means to give thanks in the Oneida language. Traveling north, did you see Spirit Hawk dancing on the wind? Did you feel morning sun's warmth upon your face, welcoming you to a new day? Did you see the white birch standing tall from the dark woods and the greening of the aspen's saplings? Did you smell the sweet scent of the sacred cedar? Did you see the fields of the 3 sisters coming? Did you see sun's face in the buttercup? And did you see skies blue in the wildwood violets? Did you greet the four-leggeds and celebrate the winged ones' dances? Did you trace turtles' tracks along the creek and know you weren't alone? Did you hear wind sing your name? Does your memory bring sweet grass's fragrance? Did you taste the thunder's moist sky waters? Were you healed by meadows' wild strawberries? Did your eyes catch sunset's burgundy? Did you see trillion stars lying upon the forest bed's heaven? Did you sense Grandmother Moon guiding you home again? Did your heart bring home the songs of all these living? Did you, along with these, travel this sacred circle called spring? I give thanks to my sister for writing this beautiful book, blessing us with it. And I'm so privileged and honored that I could present this to you. Thank you.
There was a lot of vision in that story. A lot of words that children can understand and help them look at it, maybe things a little bit differently than what they know. In my family, I'm presenting a book from Chief Jacob Swamp. He passed on in October of 2010. He's a Mohawk. He's a chief. Never was a Christian. But a longhouse, oh yeah. And what he did is that he took a traditional prayer of the longhouse, looked through the prayer, and the prayer is of the old ways is not like what we have. Our prayers of the old way goes on for a long period of time, probably like your sister's book, a snippet of what the longhouse is, just a snippet. And in keeping with the season, if you will, of Thanksgiving, Chief Jake Swamp wrote a book called Giving Thanks. And what he did is he took, and we have examples of, in more detail, what the prayer is that I'm going to be sharing with you. But what it is just a snippet adapted for children so that they have an understanding of how we look at prayer in the Longhouse tradition. And in the Longhouse tradition, giving thanks isn't just on next Thursday. Giving thanks is every day. It is a way of life. That's why we have medicine people. The medicine people are busy doing this all the time so that we have a way of being good with our relatives. Not only our living relatives, but the relatives that have passed on into the other world. This is how we're able to find that harmony. And so, just a little bit here on Chief Swamp. He's Mohawk. I'm Oneida. How could that be? This is where we explain that, I guess. Donna likes to say I'm confused. What it is that, and I've met Jake Swamp when he was here. He actually blessed a tree on the UW campus over by the observatory. And when he did that, it was about a 3-hour service. where he recited the various serious parts that needed to be said in order to have this a blessing for this tree on the campus. The more traditional service for such a blessing is 3 days long. And that isn't a matter of knowing the words. He knew the words. It's a matter of understanding what needs to be said and say it in a tradition of a university, not a native world. And so he said what must be said. But we had a chance to talk. And you see, back in the families in the 1820s, there was such a thing as the First Christian Party. That was a sponsorship of the Episcopal Church. And we were originally the Haudenosaunee, that's all the people of the Iroquois, as you would know it. We would refer to ourselves as Haudenosaunee. We were originally in New York, but our land was being taken by the Ogden Land Company with the sponsorship of the New York State. And with that, things were getting difficult for us. But we had the protection of the Episcopal Church. And so another story, which we're not going to get into, we ended up coming through. Now, I did a presentation one time, just a little aside, with fourth graders, and they had it all planned out, how we got to Green Bay and how we got to Oneida. And they had us on the interstate. That isn't how it worked. In our day, the way we did this is that the roadways were the seaways, barges and boats, and we did the Great Lakes. And we came through the Great Lakes on a great journey up through to Green Bay. And we had wagons, and we had all sorts of goods that we came. But we were the first Christian party. And so my relative, Jake Swamp, knew that there was a family several generations back that had joined the Episcopal Church. And so when they left, they all left together. And so while the main party was Oneida, other people of the Haudenosaunee came along, and my family being part of that. Now, my grandfather married a Hill, and therefore, then we get into this whole conflict we were just talking about. The Oneidas are a matrilineal society. So by the matrilineal society, I would be Turtle Clan. But the Mohawk is patrilineal. And so by Mohawk standards, I'm Wolf Clan. Now, one of the things that happens when you're part of the Episcopal mission, as we came to Green Bay, we were the first Christian party. And being so, clan doesn't count. We were Episcopal. And up until my grandfather died, when he passed on, we needed to contact the Episcopal Church. Now, one of the questions I always get is, when did I convert to being a Lutheran? Well, 3 months before I was born, my father changed from Episcopal to Lutheran, and my mother was Lutheran. And so when I was born Lutheran, and I was baptized Lutheran. And so we're doing this on a media presentation, so I never have to be asked that question again. I'm supposed to speak up, but see, in this particular case, I got that slide off a little bit. And so our story is one of survival and how things went. One of the things that occurred in my family as we're coming into how I got here has to do with my grandfather. My grandfather was in Oneida up until the boarding school days. One of the things that we have in common, whether it's Donna, whether it's any Native person, we either have a grandparent or great-grandparent who was part of that boarding school experience. And I know from my family, My grandfather never talked about it. We all have our own struggles with this. Now, I did bring some books along where some of the folks actually were able to talk with their grandparents, and they have a different story than what we have. We're just telling our story tonight. I need to let you know that each Native person has a different story, a different experience. One commonality is the boarding school experience. We all have that in our families. Another commonality that we have is that we all have an enrollment number. That has to do with if we're, enrolled in the nation. And that's another long issue we're not going to get into, but it's just another commonality that we have. So let's get on with giving thanks before we get into some other stories. Where's my, oh, there it is. Try to reduce some of the papers in my hand here. Giving thanks. To be a human being is an honor. And we offer thanksgiving for all the gifts of life. Mother Earth, we thank you for giving us everything we need. Thank you, deep blue waters around Mother Earth, for you are the force that takes thirst away from all living things. We give thanks to the green grasses that feel so good against our bare feet for the cool beauty you bring to Mother Earth's floor. Thank you, good foods from Mother Earth, our life sustainers, for making us happy when we are hungry. Fruits and berries, we thank you for your color and sweetness. We are all thankful for good medicine, herbs, and for healing us when we are sick. Thank you, all the animals in the world, for keeping our precious forests clean. All the trees in the world are thankful for the shade and warmth you give us. Thank you for all the birds in the world and for singing your beautiful songs, for all to enjoy. We give thanks to you, gentle four winds, for bringing clean air for us to breathe from the four directions. If you notice, this was before we got into pollution issues. This is from a prayer that goes back millennia. Thank you, Grandfather Thunder Beings, for bringing rains to help all living things to grow. Elder Brother Sun, we send thanks for shining your light and warming Mother Earth. Thank you, Grandmother Moon, for growing full every month to light the darkness for children and sparkling waters. We give thanks, twinkling stars, for making the night sky so beautiful and for sprinkling morning dewdrops on the plants. Spirit protectors of our past and present, we thank you for showing us ways to live in peace and harmony with one another. For most of all, thank you, Great Spirit, for giving us all these wonderful gifts so we will be happy and healthy every day and every night. So that is for the children. The prayer itself is much more detailed. And we have an example of that we will share a little bit later. One of the things we're doing here is to talk about, the strengths and resiliency of Native people. We've gone through a lot. We have this phenomenon of being the only people of color that's regulated by federal law. In fact, there's actually an Indian code that has to do with laws of behavior, criminal acts on the reservation, and all that. We're the only ones. Like I mentioned before, we have tribal IDs. We are registered. We have a tribal role. It makes us unique in terms of our relationship with the federal government. Now, up in Oneida, we periodically have this little township of Hobart that likes to drag Oneida in to court to say, well, you know, the tribe, they have this and they have that, and they go on, accusing us of having to actually have jurisdiction over ourselves. And, you know, they're complaining about that because the state laws should apply. And so periodically they find a young attorney to come in and argue for them. And they go to court, and our tribal attorneys share with the judge the usual treaty laws that there are, and their case is thrown out on its face because we are a federally recognized nation in the United States. We have our own jurisdiction. We are a people that is recognized by the federal government. But they still struggle with that. And so they spend money, then we have to spend money because we have to go to court about that. But even now, it's 2017. Even now, they still try. And so that's one of the struggles we have as a Native people, even as a nation. Now, one of the things we do now, I don't know, Donna, do you remember when we got started with the General Tribal Council? It goes back quite a ways. I remember way back when we would generally have 2 meetings a year. And that was, you know, are we before 2000 that we did that? You know, it used to be they would have a General Tribal Council meeting and we have maybe a couple hundred people show up. Nowadays, when we have General Tribal Council meeting, when you think about 1,200, 1,400, 1,500, 1,300, yeah, they come in, and so we have a much more greater participation in our government. That's in addition to, that's where all the people gather, General Tribal Council. And in addition to our own council members, we have a board of the business committee. Yeah, I have to remember some of these terms we use. We have a business committee of various Native people that run our business and all that, and they oversee our day-to-day operations. But we do have a General Tribal Council, and that council now tends to meet every so many months. Continuing concerns. One of the things that we passed recently is the fact that we're going to be called, instead of, how does that go, the Wisconsin? The Wisconsin tribe of the Oneida of Wisconsin. It was a long drawn out. We are simply going to change that. We had to get special permission to be the United Nation. And that went through about 3 different layers of approval in order for that simply to occur. So there's a lot of other things that occur as we deal with tribal business and tribal ways. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out, though, in these books is you can hear some commonalities of talking about the trees, various things that are around you every day. And that's a commonality in both books, even though they're written by very different people from different traditions, but also part of the Haudenosaunee. We're all the same. And one of the things that we wanted to bring to you in terms of this discussion is that there are different ways of looking at how we all are. One of my sister is a superintendent of the Oneida Tribal Schools, and her husband is Lakota, and one of his friends wrote a book referring to how we all need to be understanding of one another because after all we are all related, and that there are commonalities. What he's referring to is we have commonalities as human beings, and in those commonalities we are in fact all related. And so then again, we need to respect each other, and we need to be able to talk in a good conscience towards each other and understanding, making that effort to understand each other. That was tested mightily in Standing Rock just a little while ago. And now as we move forward, you know, part of the concern that was out there in Standing Rock was how the pipelines would leak. And so as I stand here today, they're talking about over 200,000 gallon leak in South Dakota of not just any oil, but the tar sands oil, the most cruel, difficult substance there is, especially for cleanup. It'll be interesting to see if that leak didn't occur because of the caustic nature of that substance that they were putting through the pipes. We'll have to see about that. That's to be determined. We're not here to talk about that. It's just a matter of trying to understand that, you know, that was an example, and it wasn't covered very well, of how people did not speak very well of each other, did not respect each other. But it's something that we have in our own ways outside of the Christian church that came into us as people. Now, as we come to Wisconsin in the 1820s, I talked about the first Christian party, the Episcopal Party. There was also the second Christian party, third, fourth, and fifth Christian party. They were all sponsored by different denominations, Christian denominations. That's not to say that other churches weren't involved. You go among the Menominee, they'll tell you the strong influence of the Jesuit and Catholic Church up there. So we all have, as people, as Native people, we all have a history with the church. And it's different. It's different for each community as to what that was. Way back when, there was a time when I sought to find out old traditional stories of Native people as a history project. And I went to the State Historical Society, the archives over in by the university there. And what I found was a whole series of diaries, if you will, various reports and so forth about the Ojibwa nations, the Menominee, and actually written from or slightly before the Oneidas got here. And I was looking for the stories. What were their stories? Not the stories we shared with you, but what were some of the other stories? And what I found was these various missionaries were more concerned about not what they were hearing among the people, but how good Christians they were. And if they had stories, they put them in the context of biblical stories that were already in the Bible. Changed names, but that's all that was there. Now, of course, looking back at that and taking a step away, you know, they're looking at, you know, letting people know they're doing a good job so they can get funded, that they can keep their mission going. But the whole notion of actually saying what there was going on among the people wasn't really their goal. And so that's part of how I can begin to understand what I found in archives way back when. Because the things I was looking for just weren't there. And yet, Native people, up until the more recent times, we didn't have access to writing anything, telling our story. Coming forward out of the boarding schools is when we begin to have people step up and tell our stories. And so one of the things we did in an earlier presentation is to present a film in reference to the boarding school experience as part of our mission that we did with the Senate. But the thing is all of us as Native people, we relate to that through the notion that we know our grandparent, our great-grandparent was there. However, they don't say what happened. They don't share about how things were. I mentioned before, we preserved our language here in Wisconsin with hymns. It's only with the hymns that we could have the language preserved. It's my generation that sought the handful of speakers we had to empower them to bring the language forward into the schools, into the tribal schools, into the community, to bring that up again. My sister's youngest son, for his graduation class in high school in Oneida, their valedictorian was able to address the entire group in Oneida in the language. That's the first time. And so the language is coming back now, but it had a long, long trip. And the only way we preserve that is through song. Now, the Iroquois song that was presented here, if you go back to when I was growing up, that wouldn't be there. That wasn't allowed. You'd have to go back to New York, and back in the woods somewhere where they would do that and preserve that. It would not be here in Wisconsin. But you know, it's our generation. We didn't let that be. We raised it up and brought it forward. And so you could hear it. That's just part of the struggle that we've had in terms of being Native people in this big world around us. Now, one of the other things I shared previously here is, with some other people, is that when I went to school, and I'm going to date myself here, I went to college in 1968. So I went to Oshkosh, graduated in 72. In those days, the story goes that there was 1,000 Native students that went to school. Of those 1,000, only one would graduate from college. Now, praise and thank God, it's not like that anymore. But that's what it was like when I was going to school. When I was going to school, especially when you move away from the community. Now, I grew up in Appleton. That has to do with another federal policy, the Indian Relocation Act. But I grew up in, my grandfather moved us there coming from the boarding schools. He ended up working for the city of Appleton, so we moved to Appleton. And that's where my father grew up, and and then eventually I grew up. And so when we did that, even then, it was unheard of that we would be able to go to something like college. What's with that? That's unheard of. Well, I had this crazy notion, and I worked, and I played in a rock and roll band. Love that set there. And so I had these notions that I could just go and do something foolish like going to college. So I did that. Well, along the way, that summer that I went to college, I had gotten the letter, so I knew that I was going to go. I was accepted at Oshkosh. But that summer, my dad passed away. Acute coronary occlusion, heart attack. And so it was a challenge to make that choice that, yeah, I need to go there because, my mother's still there, my sister, my little sister, and where did I get the guidance to do this? My pastor. Later on, years later, we had on occasion met my pastor again. We had heard that he was coming back to the church in Appleton, where he had been the pastor years ago. We called him aside. My mother was still alive then, to let him know that not only did he give us good advice, I went to school, got a bachelor's degree, went on for a master's degree, and I'm a commissioned officer in the Army. because he told me to. And my sister went on and got her bachelor's degree and master's, and she's not quite an ABD these days, but she is superintendent of Oneida. And so there is influence of church, even in my own family, of how that makes a difference for how we make choices to go forward. Because we were by ourselves. There wasn't anyone else telling us. When I was growing up in the elementary school, they all knew we were Indians because my grandfather was right there. And if anything else, you know, he was dark and he always had his hair out. So they always knew those were the Indians. And I was the boy, so I got to hear all that. So I know about being confronted, being bullied, being all that. In the end, when I later went on to be a school social worker, I would leave out the punchline where I was confronted one time, 5th grade, by the class bully. And he was going to show me what for. He was going to take care of that Indian. But see, the thing is, my father was a Golden Gloves champion. And he had taught me a few moves. And so when he confronted me and all, you know, it was only a couple punches, you know. That's all. And I left, but you know, inside I was crying because I never wanted to hurt anybody. And yet I was confronted. And there again, you come back to Christian love. You know, so we have these tribulations, these trials we have, even as we grow up. On Facebook, they have all these outrageous things they say, and people will say mad or angry this and angry that. I'll say sad. Because in my Christian way, why should I be angry about something? It doesn't reach me that way. I see it as something to be sad about. It's sad that we have leadership that's so poor. It's sad that people are being hurt by policies. It's sad that, you know, we cannot be lifting each other up because, you know, that's how it should be. We should all be lifting each other up, making for a better day. It is our way of the Haudenosaunee without Christian influence. With Christian influence, we need to be louder about that. But that's another side story to you know, where these stories are coming from, what these books were about.
Some drinks in here as our speakers get readjusted. I realized that I failed to mention the name of the books that Donna and George read. Donna's book was titled "Did You Hear Wind Sing Your Name? An Oneida Song of Spring." And the book that George read is titled "Giving Thanks, a Native American Thanksgiving Message." And again, we'll have links with this information that we'll send out to you via email. So please make sure that you leave us your email address. All right.
George and I will be reading the Thanksgiving address in English to you, unfortunately. We are the generation that we do not know our language, unfortunately. So it will be in English.
But our children are getting there.
Our children are getting there, that's right. So these words of Thanksgiving come to us from Native people known as a Haudenosaunee. I never can pronounce that right. Haudenosaunee. See what I mean? Also Iroquois, or Six Nations. The Mohawk, Oneida, Cayuga, Onondaga, Seneca, and Tuscarora, or upstate New York and Canada. The Thanksgiving address has ancient roots dating back over 1,000 years to the formation of the great law of peace by a man called the Peacemaker. And perhaps before that. Today, these words are still spoken at the opening and closing of all ceremonial and governmental gatherings held by the Six Nations. A speaker is chosen to give the Thanksgiving greetings on behalf of the people. They choose their own words, for we are all unique and have our own style, but the general form is traditional. It follows an order in which we can relate to all of the creation. The address is based on the belief that the world cannot be taken for granted, that a spiritual communication of thankfulness and acknowledgement of all living things must be given to align the minds and hearts of the people with nature. This forms a guiding principle of culture. We believe that all people at one time in their history had a similar words to acknowledge the works of the Creator. With this in mind, we offer these words in a written form as a way to reacquaint ourselves with this shared vision. Our vision of the Thanksgiving address has been modified for a young general audience. It has been shortened, and many specific references to the culture of the Six Nations have been generalized. We hope this will enhance the accessibility of the words for our readers around the world. It was Jake Swamp's original version that this address would go out to the children of the world, so that later in life, when they go out and meet one another, they will find that they are all coming from the same place. This booklet is printed in Mohawk and English languages. And of course, future editions are planned in Mohawk German, Mohawk Spanish, Mohawk Hawaiian, Mohawk Japanese. You are invited, encouraged to share in these words that our concentrated attention might help us rediscover our balance, respect, and oneness with nature. Now our minds are one.
I should point out that the reason that this particular booklet, which predates the book I read to you, is talking about different languages, is that Chief Jake Swamp actually went to the UN and addressed other nations in reference to the way of the Great Peace, which he was a caretaker of that knowledge as part of the Mohawk people.
The people. Today we have gathered and we see that the cycles of life continue. We have been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other and all living things. So now we bring our minds together as one, as we give greetings and thanks to each other as people. The Earth Mother. We are all thankful to our Mother, the Earth, for she gives us all that we need for life. She supports our feet as we walk about upon her. It gives us joy that she continues to care for us, as she has from the beginning of time. To our Mother, we send greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one. The waters. We give thanks to all the waters of the world for quenching our thirst and providing us with strength. Water is life. And I have a necklace that my niece made when she went to Standing Rock. And it's one of the necklaces that stand together against the pipeline for pure water, because water is life. We know its power in many forms: waterfalls and rain, mist and streams, rivers and oceans. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to the Spirit of water. Now our minds are one. The fish, as we say in the Oneida language, gunji. We turn our minds to all the fish life in the water. They are instructed to cleanse and purify the water. They also give themselves to us as food. We are grateful that we can still find pure water. So we turn now to the fish and send our greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one. The plants. Now we turn toward the vast fields of plant life, as far as the eye can see. Plants grow, working many wonders. They sustain many life forms. With our minds gathered together, we give thanks and look forward to seeing plant life for many generations to come. Now our minds are one. The food plants. With one mind, we turn to honor and thank all food plants we harvest from the garden. Since the beginning of time, the grains, vegetables, beans, and berries have helped the people survive. Many other living things draw strength from them too. We gather all the plant foods together as one and send them a greeting and thanks. Now our minds are one. The medicine herbs. Now we turn to all the medicine herbs of the world. From the beginning, they were instructed to take away sickness. They are always waiting and ready to heal us. We are happy there are still among us those special few who remember how to use these plants for healing. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to the medicine and to the keepers of the medicines. Now our minds are one. The animals. We gather our minds together to send greetings and thanks to all the animal life in the world. They have many things to teach us as people. We see them near our homes and in deep forests. We are glad they are still here, and we hope that it will always be so. Now our minds are one. George.
Ah, yes. My turn. I hope you are beginning to... The book I read was more general, perhaps visual with the paintings and so forth, but now we're getting closer to the traditional words that were being spoken that go back to the millennia. You'll hear that there's more depth, there's more is more specific than the illustrations that we had. And this is, again, just a sample of the Longhouse, the old way, things before the Episcopal Church joined the Oneidas, Mohawks, and everyone else. Tree, right? That's where I start. Okay. Now we turn our thoughts to the trees. The earth has many families of trees who have their own instructions and uses. Some provide us with shelter and shade, others with fruit, beauty, and other useful things. Many people of the world use a tree as a symbol of peace and strength. With one mind, we greet and thank the tree life. The birds. We put our minds together as one and thank all the birds who move and fly about over our heads. The Creator gave them beautiful songs. Each day they remind us to enjoy and appreciate life. The eagle was chosen to be their leader. To all the birds, from the smallest to the largest, we send our joyful greetings and thanks. The four winds. We all are thankful to the powers we know as the four winds. We hear their voices in moving air as they refresh us and purify the air we breathe. They help us bring the change of seasons from our four directions they come, bringing us messages and giving us strength. With one mind, we send our greetings and thanks to the four winds. I should mention that this is deer hunting season, and those of us that are native, we generally carry tobacco with us. And when I used to hunt, and I was just reminded by Facebook the other day that it's been 5 years since I've done this, what we try to do, at least the way I would hunt, is to take one round and to bring the deer down with one round. The idea, the goal that I would be seeking is that the deer would be walking along, I would fire my round, and the deer would drop, and that spirit would keep moving. And then as I come upon the body, I would offer tobacco, that the spirit will be refreshed and renewed in the directions it faces and the way it goes. And that's something that those of us that are native, we know this, but it's nothing that anyone else does. It's just something that, in part of our traditions in terms of how we do things, there is a slight difference than what everyone else does. Of course, when we're hunting, we're the only ones around. No one else knows what we're doing. But that's just a little aside. And I usually give thanks to the four winds because it's usually with the deer, you have to be, in a way where the deer can't pick you up with the winds. And if that's the case, you can have your shot. But I've seen a lot of deer and I don't shoot unless they're right where I know I can take that shot and do what I need to do. If they're not there, if they're over there, we honor our animal friends. And when I take deer, it's to eat, for food, to share with my family and others. All right. Another item that is part of the prayer that would be offered. Now we turn to the west, where our grandfathers, the thunder beings, live. With lightning and thundering voices, they bring with them the water that renews life. We bring our minds together as one to send greetings and thanks to our grandfathers, the thunderers. The sun. And now we send greetings and thanks to our eldest brother, the sun. Each day without fail he travels the sky from east to west, bringing the light of a new day. He is the source of all the fires of life. With one mind we send greetings and thanks to our brother, the sun. Now our minds are one. We put our minds together and give thanks to our oldest grandmother, the moon, who lights the nighttime sky. She's the leader of all women all over the world and governs the movement of the ocean tides. By her changing face, we measure time. And it is the moon who watches over the arrival of children here on earth. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to our grandmother, the moon. Now our minds are one. We give thanks to the stars who spread across the sky like jewelry. We see them in the night, helping the moon to light the darkness and bring dew to the gardens and growing things. When we travel at night, they guide us home. With our minds gathered together as one, we send greetings and thanks to all the stars. Now our minds are one. We gather our minds to greet and thank the enlightened teachers who have come to help throughout the ages. When we forget how to live in harmony, they remind us of the way we were instructed to live our lives as people. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to these caring teachers. Now our minds are one. Now we turn our thoughts to the Creator, or Great Spirit. We send greetings and thanks for all the gifts of creation. Everything we need to live a good life is here on this Mother Earth. for all the love that is still around us, we gather our minds together as one and send our choicest words of greetings and thanks to the Creator. Now our lives, our minds are one. We have now arrived at the place where we end our words. All of the things we have named, it was not our intention to leave anything out. If something was forgotten, we leave it to each individual to send such a greeting and thanks in their own way. And now our minds are one. The reason we went through this is to really give you a sense of the kind of detail there is to the traditional way of prayer of our people, of the Longhouse, of people that, before the influence of the shorter prayers and things that we have now in our church gatherings. Now, Donna, Longhouse is now in Oneida. How long are the services that just go through in Oneida?
It can go for days.
Which means they're really seeking to be traditional, because that is really how it always was. And so going to become an Episcopal or Methodist or whatever, geez, you can do it under a day. There's some practical notions on some of how this plays out, but because it was really hard in the old way to be that Indian, because you had to recognize so many things. And when we had medicine people, our medicine people were the ones who knew this, who would lead us and help us with this. And back in my family history, my sister told me at one point that we had medicine people in our family. And I suspect it has something to do with that family that was left in Mohawk country with Jake Swamp and all those folks, because he knew these. And he not only spread the word of the great peace, the law of the great peace among the Mohawk, but he was a spokesman throughout the countries. And he went to Europe, and he went to Japan, spreading the word of the great peace. And also the UN, as I mentioned before. And so this is not something, this is part of the message that was not just within the closed Longhouse. There are many more things that are part of the Longhouse that are not shared, that are not part of this. Just as in this area where we are, this is Ho-Chunk country. And the people of the Ho-Chunk country, they have a traditional religion as well, and it is closed. And so when I would be with friends that are Ho-Chunk, and they would bring things up, I'd remind them, no, that's part of your stuff. We can't talk about that, because I respect, their religion, their people, their faith, their belief, and I'm not part of them. And so therefore, that's their conversation, not mine, because I need to respect their ways. We don't hear a lot of that these days from other folks. Everyone wants to know. They don't always want to respect the old ways or what is to be shared and what isn't. But these are the few things that we have that have been published that we can share. And so we do that with you today, this evening. And so we have time, and so I'd like to take some time here for if anyone want to come up, and we need for you to come up to the microphones and ask a question, because what happens is this is being recorded, and if you just shout it out from there, it doesn't pick up. So you need to come up to the microphone to ask your questions, and we can tell our stories from there. Part of our difficulty with arranging for this evening is that every time we sat down, we just got talking into all sorts of family stories. And so chances are, if you ask us a question, we'll start sharing more stories. But if you will, you have a question, we can certainly share with you. As you mentioned, Donna had a relative that went to Standing Rock And I have a nephew that's a police officer out in South Dakota. They didn't have anything to do with that, but you know. So I mean, we have other stories we can share. Don't all be shy now. Just come on up to the mics and ask us a question. We'll go from there. We have a few minutes left.
Well, George, you addressed part of my question right at the end there, where saying that there are parts of the old religion are closed to those who aren't, I don't know, adherents isn't the right word, but aren't followers of it.
That's great.
But that, is it a, since Oneida is matrilineal, is the religion both male and female, or is it held by one group over the other?
You want to move?
Well, in the longhouse,
Come on up.
it's divided by the clans that you belong to. I'm of the Turtle clan, and there's the wolf, and let's see, the wolf, the bear, and help me out, son. The three, the wolf, bear, and the turtle. And so it depends on what you're doing in the longhouse, what your kind of assignment is, or what you've been a medicine person, or it just varies. Like the women, they are known to do a lot of grunt work with the cooking and stuff like that, you know, whatever. But there are women that are medicine people, and the men, they are medicine people also. So that's I have limited knowledge of that, unfortunately. But that's what I can come up. George, you got anything to say about that? No?
No, the longhouse in Oneida. See, my brother-in-law, who's Lakota, does sweat lodge, and that's a strictly male function. But that's Lakota.
That's Lakota. Yes, as you come to realize, I know since I've came to Madison 25 years ago, I have met a lot of people that they don't have knowledge of how things operate with our people, our native people, and they don't realize that we do speak different languages. We believe different things, similarities, but different ways. And our ceremonies are different, and our housing, the old way, we're different, you know, and a lot of people don't know. Thank God, you know, they're finding out. We're here to help them along.
That's a good point. Up in Oneida, they do have a kind of a history museum where they actually have a mock-up of what a traditional longhouse was. And that's where your relatives, you all live together, and the in-laws are closer to the door, of course.
Of course, of course.
But, you know, they were these long, actually built, substantial wooden framed houses out of logs and so forth. That was the traditional long, and there's mock-ups, examples of that up in Oneida at the History Museum.
That's right. Yes, sir.
Question for George. You had mentioned the person who went to Japan, to the United Nations, and to, I forget the third place, speaking of message of peace, I think is what you said. But could you, I didn't catch who this was and what the context of when and under what program that was a part of and so forth.
Yeah, that was Chief Jake Swamp.
Is that a relative of yours then?
Yes. It's relative in a remoted kind of sense because it goes back to when the first Christian party came to Wisconsin. A Swamp family was part of the first Christian party. And the signature on the treaty verifies that, you know, he signed as a party of the first Christian party coming to Wisconsin in the Oneida delegation. That was the Episcopal delegation. However, the rest of the family at that point was in New York in the Mohawk Nation. And as we come forward, Chief Jake Swamp of the Mohawk was the peacemaker. And he established a series of schools and other kinds of facilities around with the message of peace. And among that, he actually traveled to Europe and Japan and actually addressed the, it's not the full United Nations, it was a committee of the United Nations in terms of being a giver of peace, and that we need to be seeking these goals of peace. Mm-hmm. And that was part of his recognition, especially as he passed on. People remembered this of him.
I have two different questions. One is, I'm just curious about the tree on the UW campus and why that tree, what the significance of that particular tree is, and how Chief Swamp was, how he was designated as a person to lead that ceremony. And then the second question I have is, you mentioned a couple times tribal IDs. I'm not familiar with what that is. Can you explain that?
Well, that's one of the unique aspects of being an enrolled member of the nation. Ho-Chunks have it, we have it, all the tribes of Wisconsin have a tribal ID card. You can actually vote with it by law. What was the other question?
It was to keep track of us. It originally was with our numbers, and you know, I always said that, like, you know, were we pedigrees? You know, that we had to be, you know, numbered and given these numbers, etc., to keep track of us.
So everyone is assigned a number upon birth?
Well, you have to enroll, and they have to see that you have blood quantum appropriate to that nation. It's actually a very diabolical way of ending the nation.
Us people, yes. It with our Oneidas, it is called the blood quantum, and the more we marry out of the tribe, the blood thins out, and then eventually it's you know, unfortunately designed like that. So eventually there's no Oneidas no more, or there's no more Ho-Chunks, or there's no more whoever, you know, invented this. That's what was the purpose of that. And of course, there are certain things that each tribe has to maintain in order to continue to be tribally recognized by the federal government. If you don't meet those, they say, well, that's it for you. You're no longer a tribe.
And that's being played out now. The Ojibwa Nation in particular has sought to have various other kinds of factors considered in that tribal recognition. We do have control of our own tribal roles now, but then they still have these laws that go back that are holding us to where we have to get a waiver or an exception in order to consider something else to maintain our tribal identity. So, you know, way back when, you know, when I was just a young guy, we used to tease each other that, you know, I got my card, you know, I make Indian babies, what do you make? You know? So, I mean, there was a time we made fun of these things. But, you know, now in our generations, we look at that and it's serious.
Yes, it really is. A lot of the nations in Wisconsin are being faced with this now.
Yeah.
What to do, how are we going to maintain our tribalness, our people. You know, if the blood quantum drops, and some tribes drop it further and further, like in our tribe, you're required to be at least a quarter blood. And this is through relatives, through Oneida relatives and enrolled people and all this history. And once that starts dropping down, the nation can make it happen where, okay, we're running out of people, and so we're going to drop the blood quantum down to 1/8 or 1/16, you know, to try to survive as a tribe.
And that's being played out now. That's something that is in discussion across Indian country. That's, by the way, that's how we refer to things. Indian country, all Native people. We now have internet connections and newspapers and all sorts of things. So there is this way of us maintaining ourselves in this new electronic world.
And her other question.
The other question was about the tree at UW.
Oh, the tree. Well, that was something that occurred through the, well, part of it was the university at the time. We had an assistant, I don't know if he was provost or what, but it was something that the student group, Wang Shi, and a number of other groups got together looking at this, and they were having a tour coming through the Midwest, and so they sought to be scheduled. And I think the thing that persuaded was the fact that we actually had a Native member of the university administration request that this would occur. And so I know I didn't have a direct role because I found out about it after the fact. So I was so glad to be able to have that opportunity. And of course, because of my name, we of course got a chance to talk while he was here, and we sorted out a number of things because of that. And that's why I can share some things now, because of that conversation. But that tree is still there, and there's a little plaque over by it now. And I think a lot of it had to do with that at the particular time we had some sponsorship from the university to allow that to occur.
I have another sister, the eldest, who passed away very young, but she did receive her master's degree through UW-Milwaukee. And when she passed away, unfortunately, I wasn't there for the ceremony, but she was known in the Indian community there, and they did the same thing as the tree thing. She has a plaque somewhere on the campus with her name and her birth date and her death date and her she was in education also. She got her master's degree in education also. So trees evidently, you know, mean a lot to our people. The trees are so important, and I believe it is a pine that they have that plaque in the ground for her.
One of the things I think before we wrap things up or whatever here is to point out that, you know, you have relatives that are well educated. My family is well educated. We are not the common. There's a lot of Native people who have not done the struggle of going to college and all that. But we are here, and because of our success going forward, we are able to share our stories with you.
And it was my mother's encouragement that my two sisters went on to college and they got their master's degree. Had it not been for her progressive way of thinking, perhaps they may have not. And we unfortunately do see people that they don't have that encouragement from their relatives or their mother and father, and they don't proceed with so much potential they have. Yes. Yes, go ahead.
Both you and George have talked about being a longhouse people, and I understand that the longhouse is a physical entity, but it sounds like longhouse means more than just that physical presence of longhouse. And if that's true, could either of you or both of you speak to that?
And yes, it is. It is our spiritual. I wasn't raised as a longhouse person, nor I believe George either. But we know of the longhouse. We have been in the longhouse. Is that right, George? You've been in the longhouse too, right? With different ceremonies, huh? I'm
Lutheran.
Anyway, well, you know you're welcome to come to the longhouse. But it really is the old ways, the spiritual beliefs of the old ways coming back, and that was the name of the spiritual people of the Longhouse. That was their way of living. That was their belief system.
And I can say I've been invited to some of the traditional services, but they weren't really Longhouse. They're part of the sweat lodge tradition out of my relative Lakota. My sister invited me to their ceremony, and under that sponsorship I was able to attend some of their activities. But I clearly, if they're a mass, I tell them I'm Lutheran, so that there's no misunderstanding of my presence or what's going on, because we need to respect that difference.
And the people of the Longhouse do. And like myself, I'm spiritual, and I do consider myself a Christian as well, but I am always welcome in our Longhouse, our sacred Longhouse. As you, George.
Well, it has to do with family. You know, it's family though that does that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, George. Okay. Any other questions? No? Yes?
As a former teacher, storytelling is a big part, and I'm wondering about your tradition of storytelling and how important that is today, and if you have a favorite Native American folktale that, or just talk a little bit about that.
Well, I used to have a book, and I still have it somewhere. I would use it to put my son to bed and read these stories, all about various animals, and like how the bear once had a long tail and doesn't have one anymore, and a number of other stories like that. They're just the darndest things, and my son doesn't do much with church anymore, but he still does tease me every now and then about those stories, and he remembers them. I'm just like, well, at least he remembers that. Yeah, we all struggle with our 20-something-year-old relatives, or sons and daughters who don't quite do church the way we used to. So, to that end, I think in a lot of ways when we talk about the difference in our value systems, one of the frustrations I had when I went to the Historical Society, as I mentioned, is that I was wondering if these missionaries would talk anything about that, and they wouldn't. They didn't. But there was so much stuff that was lost, that was shared, and only a handful of that has come forward, where somebody actually wrote it down so the rest of us can share that and bring that forward. And I did, by the way, bring a couple other books along, just to let you know that when we're telling a story, other people actually wrote some of this stuff down. The Oneida Indian Journey talks pretty much about how we got together and came to Wisconsin, and coming across. New Voices from the Longhouse, an anthology of contemporary Iroquois writing. And again, this will tell you some stories. I can't vouch for how authentic they might be, because generally speaking, they're talking about things that we don't talk about. The Oneida Indian Experience, again, written by, it says, in two perspectives. Another story, trying to bring the story of Oneida forward from when we got here. The Song of the Turtle, Indian Literature, 1974 to 1994. Oh, that was ancient, wasn't it? But again, so there are things written out there, stories and so forth. Wampum belts of the Iroquois. That's one of the things that we were known about in the old days. In fact, even the Milwaukee History Museum has some of these. That's all part of our way. So again, those are traditional values, traditional things, of which a smidgen of that is brought forward to help identify. But in Oneida, one of the strong colors we have is purple, along with this design of wampum. If we are out, my cousin from Florida, she dances. She's a smoke dancer. And her outfit is such that it has some of these patterns. And so anyone around knows immediately, you know, that she is from Oneida. And she really isn't, of course, she's from Florida. But she has the colors of the Oneida Nation. And so when they had the camp at Standing Rock, you know, we looked around and they had this line of tribal flags. Okay, fine. And then I'm looking at it, and about 2-3 weeks in there, all of a sudden I see this big old purple flag with the sign, and we knew that our people were there. Nothing was said. We could see that, and we knew. And I'm sure other people recognized their colors and had the same conclusion. And so at Standing Rock, we had a coming together of nations. Nothing was said about that, except for Indian country. We knew about it. We talked among ourselves and among other people, but you guys didn't hear about it, but you know, it wasn't our fault. We knew. That's one of the ways we knew. Any other questions?
So, two things. Well, Donna, I'd love it if you would tell us a little bit more about what you're wearing, and if it has any meaning, you know. And when you said wampum, exactly what is that? Is that the design?
That carried.
That's how we carried our. See, we made treaties among ourselves, and that's how we would tell our story about what this agreement was in our wampum.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
And also, we were having some conversation about how the language is now is coming back, and that it's being taught to your people again. And so how is that being received, I guess, and how is that being, you know, incorporated more into your culture today? You know, it's hard to bring back a language when you all don't speak it, you know, and your children are coming back. I just would love to hear more about that.
Yes. Well, of course, we all receive it wonderfully and give thanks so much that we still were able to get that language back. During our time, and I was born and raised on the Oneida Reservation, and I am descendants directly of my mother and father being boarding school victims. So even though I heard my mother speak fluent Oneida, and my sister said she heard my father speak Ojibwe, because I'm Ojibwe also, we weren't taught it. We were not allowed to teach it, and that's the result of the boarding schools. But so for our generation, I know that we are just ecstatic and we had to go to Canada to seek out those people and bring them down to Oneida to teach us our old ways again and our languages. Otherwise, there was nobody, you know, or they didn't want to teach us, you know. And it is received tremendously. We speak our when we have our tribal meetings, they sing the, is it the national anthem, son? In Oneida, right? In Oneida. And then sometimes the children, if not an elder or a veteran, will say they'll pray the Lord's Prayer sometimes in Oneida. And also a short version of the Thanksgiving prayer that you just heard from us in the language. So it's just beautiful when we hear, and I mean little kids, little children are speaking the language. It's just wonderful. What a blessing it is for us. And as far as my outfit, it's kind of thrown together. But the dress is a traditional Oneida Iroquois design. And my sister is a master seamstress in these kind of garments. The skirt I just kind of threw together, threw the ribbons on and whatever, and the leggings too, you know. But my moccasins I borrowed from my son, and of course, it's a turtle, because of course we're the turtle clan, so he's a turtle, you know. And then the wampum design back here. But and then just the jewelry, like this is from my niece who went to Standing Rock, and she gave me this here, bless her. And then this is from my other sister who went to the Native American Art Institute in Santa Fe, New Mexico. She was an artist, so she could make these beautiful necklaces and other things. But and then of course I have my turtle somewhere around here representing my clan, and then the wampum, the purple little with the tree of peace, you know, in the purple and white, which is our traditional colors. But did I miss anything? No, I don't think I did. But otherwise, you know, like I was telling Stephen Marsh, the way that you recognize, I believe it's Iroquois people in general, all 6 nations. The original skirt garment was black wool. And there's these designs with the beads, which my sister makes, the one that made this year. And you can recognize that. When you're wherever in America, you can recognize, like he said, the flag, you can recognize by that garment that, you know, that's an Iroquois, you know, it's from the Iroquois nations. So, but, and you will too, if you ever go to a powwow around here, because of course they come on down, you know, with the powwows here. And you'll see that black and then white, the white beading, whether it's domes, whether it's a tree, whether it's flowers, that's Iroquois. Okay. Thank you.
And I should say, you know, as we look out during a powwow or whatever, other folks with their designs and their colors, we can recognize which nation they're from, simply by seeing them. Now, of course, if we're in it more than we want to be, we can also tell from their name which family they're from. Too much to talk about there.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I guess we're going to wrap it up. Brian? Okay, thank you. I hope you've enjoyed our presentation. We've enjoyed you all.
Do you have anything else?
Just our music to usher everyone out.
Thank you all for coming. Please sign our list and we will keep you updated on more. Thank you so much, George and Donna.
Thank you.